In this episode, we talked about a lot of the scary things that might be in front of you when you're about to sign a contract with a builder. And we discussed things like change orders and the closeout process, warranty, insurance, and made them a little bit more approachable.
Yeah, I think it's a way for us to sort of pull back the curtain and dive into the ins and outs of the contract and demystify it. And I think we talked to a bit about the relationship between the builder and the homeowner and how this document really helps each of them understand the positions that they're in to build the home.
That's right.
Yeah, so the other night, my husband and I were talking. A friend of ours is in Houston, and they're about to start a remodel project. And he sent his architectural set and his contract to my husband and said, "Hey, ask Chelsea if to look at this." And it was kind of like, "Well, what do you want to know?" And my husband said, knowing what you know, if you were in that position, what would you tell yourself? Because I think all of my comments went back to there's a lot of stuff that you don't realize is missing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people maybe just don't really know what they're getting into as far as how the project will be run and what that cadence looks like. So today I think I would like to talk about, if you were in a position where you're about to start building a home with someone, what would you tell yourself? And maybe we could start with contract.
Yeah, because I think that's, most clients that we have not done this before.
Right.
Some have, but most have not. Every experience is different. But that's the first. Well, there's a lot of stuff that happens before that, but the contract is really that's when you're serious about pulling the trigger and actually moving forward with it. And like any contract, there's a lot of information in there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't seen one before, then you need to know what goes into a contract, what are you signing, and what does that mean?
Yeah.
So I think, Tim, you're probably the best one to answer that question.
What's in a contract?
We could do a whole podcast, and probably will someday.
That's what we're doing.
On this particular subject, right? Well, obviously, before you get to a contract, there's a period that you should get to know all the people that are working with you through design and estimating, budgeting, et cetera, and get some level or sense of trust that you trust their professionalism, you trust their honesty, integrity, you trust their knowledge and wisdom, so that when you get to the contract, you have a pretty good understanding of, okay, well, now it's time to do the paperwork, right? And we just have to make sure that I understand it.
Yeah.
And I would encourage people, always have a trusted legal professional help you review the contract and make sure that you understand what you're obligated to. Most contracts that we use in the custom home building business are promulgated by an association or a trade professional organization so that builders can uniformly use the same format and the same language across the industry. Now, some business models like ours are a little bit specific in the way they do things, and therefore we have taken the promulgated contract and customized it to the way we do business. Not that it's any more one-sided or another, or not that it looks out after anyone's interest more than anyone else's, but the language in it is more specific to the terminology and the way our process works.
Yeah, it speaks to our process specifically. Yeah.
And I think by the time we get to that point with clients, we've already explained our process, we've already gone through how we do things, and the contract becomes more of a formality. There are some details that it's important that they understand, but all contracts for construction purposes have, 10 or 12 fundamental components that go in. We don't need to get into those details, but it's fundamentally the details of the project itself, the documents that go along with that, and then what the builder's obligations are, and what the client's obligations are.
Yeah.
And making sure that everybody has proper insurance protection and liability protection in there. And that's really it. That's all
and
they
it
are.
lays out the expectations for payments and the payment schedule and, like you said, the scope of work and the design documents that should go with that.
Right.
So could we just like kind of focus on the way we do things, because there's a lot of different ways to do it, but maybe start by explaining how a cost plus structure would work?
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Sure. I think, like us, most truly site-specific custom home builders have a model that says we are professionals and we bill for our time just like design professionals do. So as consultants on this project, we are giving budgeting advice, scheduling advice. We're coordinating with trades, coordinating with suppliers. We're helping the entire team understand the complexity of the scope that they've chosen and the ramifications of any changes they make. That's what we provide as professionals. We also manage all of the resources and all of the trades that go into assembling and putting together this project. There's a lot of risk in doing that, and there's a lot of financial throughput that we take the responsibility and the fiduciary position of doing, and therefore all of that throughput, all of the dollars that come through our office, we mark up what I consider to be a fairly modest amount to cover that back-end overhead and profit portion of our business model. So the cost plus speaks to all of the costs that go into managing and executing the project, as we call them, sticks, bricks, soft costs, which are the things that it takes to keep the project moving, including project management.
Not necessarily tangible things.
Right.
Yeah.
Those are all costs of the work. Then on top of that, we mark it up with overhead and profit, generally somewhere between 15 to 20%.
Yeah. One thing that you have said in the past, which I think does a really good job of explaining that, is that we are providing a service, right? The client isn't necessarily paying us for the house, for the product.
Right.
They're paying us for the service of managing that process.
Right. And back to your initial proposition that clients need to understand from our perspective what to expect, and they may come from the perspective of understanding the process as a commodity purchase. They may be comparing it to, oh, I can go in the neighborhood I want to live in and buy an existing home for X dollars. I should be able to create a home in that same neighborhood for a comparable amount. And that's never true.
And the same is true, in architecture. I think sometimes people have the misconception that they're paying for a set of drawings, and it's not a service. But it's the same for architects, engineers, everyone involved. It's pretty much you're paying for the service,
Right.
or the labor sometimes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think in business in general, there are distinctly different service industries and distinctly different manufacturing and product industries, and their business models are very different. The way they make money, the way they interact with their clients are very different. And it's important, if I were a client, that someone tell me what to expect in terms of what kind of business am I going to be interacting with here.
Yeah.
So that they can then see, oh, okay, well, now I get it because I'm paying for a service. I'm not buying a product.
Right.
Well, let's go back to cost plus specifically and sort of define what that is, at least, and how we do that, and what that looks like from the client's perspective as far as draw schedules and initial cash deposits and things like that.
Yeah, I think payments is actually a really good place to start. Like, what does that look like? They're signing a contract with us. We've agreed to what the scope of work is and who's doing what. The next kind of thing to talk about, I think, is payments or draw schedules.
Yeah. So what we do is in order to get the project started is we take an initial cash payment, which we schedule out how long the project is going to take. And since we do our draws on a monthly schedule, so once a month we submit a draw request. So at the beginning of the project, we will determine, okay, it's going to take, say, 20 months to do this job. This is how much it's going to cost. So we divide that cost by 20, and that roughly determines what that initial cash payment is. So we ask for that up front. That gets put in its own bank account. And so during the course of that month of construction, we pay the subcontractors and the materials from that. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the month, what we do is we tally up all of those receipts and invoices and add our builder fee. And then that's what comprises the draw. And then that money then replenishes that account. So there's always that money in there as we make our way through the project.
Right. So every month, at the end of the month, we're sending, or however it falls, we're sending the client the draw for that month with invoices and receipts for everything that's happened. And then they're paying that. And then we've got funds for the next month.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that kind of brings up a question for me, and it was a question that my friend was asking about. What happens, in the case of a cost plus, where we're kind of making an estimate, to get that initial cash payment? What happens when there are changes, or there's like some unknown that later is decided, and that estimate or that budget that we started with changes?
Well, that's an interesting part of the contract itself that we haven't touched on, but the industry calls those change orders. And I think the way that developed was in commercial construction, when design team or a client wants to fundamentally change the scope of work or the design documents, it is ordering the team to make that change. Mm-hmm. So that order to change then has repercussions of cost and schedule. Mm-hmm. And then we would respond with what we estimate that impact to the scope, budget, and schedule would be, and present that to the team and say, we would like you to amend your budget by this amount to cover this change order. Mm-hmm. We don't know that it will cost exactly this amount, but we estimate that if you change the budget by that amount, it should cover that cost. Mm-hmm. And we've done this enough that generally those are fairly accurate. But we meet with clients and communicate with clients and the design professionals often enough that those discussions just become normal parts of the regular routine communication.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So there are no surprises. Again, we've talked about that in the past.
Yeah.
The whole idea behind that level of communication about migration from the original plan keeps there from being surprises to the team. And everyone understands, we amended the budget incrementally all the way through to accommodate multiple changes. But where we are today is the result and impact of all those many discussions and changes of scope.
Yeah. And it should be noted, I think people generally are familiar with the term change order. And if you're doing a fixed price or another plan, it's change order kind of is a bad word in a sense. Yeah. It's got a negative connotation, and there's usually fees involved and extra costs. And this sort of eliminates that whole negative process, right?
It does. And it's important that you, or at least we discuss that distinction between what most people think as a change order is a builder's opportunity to make more money.
Yeah.
We don't make more money. As a matter of fact, we probably don't make as much money when there are a lot of changes, because our goal is to do the project as efficiently and as quickly as we can. But we've never done a project where there weren't quite a few changes. I mean, just the nature of
custom building.
So we try to make it as painless as possible.
And it is funny, like previously I did like work in the commercial world, and I think change orders are like this thing. Like, I mean, I don't want to do them from the design side either. They're kind of a pain, and there's like a lot of paperwork. But really, it's just formalizing decisions, and it's the whole team's on board, and just kind of making sure we're moving forward and
Like continuing the design process
Right.
somewhat.
Yeah,
during-
sometimes things change
Yeah.
that you can't anticipate, and it's not. And to your point, it's not a bad thing, and it's something that, as a homeowner, it's okay to expect that there will be changes.
Yeah.
Right. I think another interesting point is to go back to something you said a while ago about how complete the plans might be. Anytime a project is starting out and a client has an understanding of what they want, and an architect has tried to translate that into design documents, it's important to understand that they're never 100% baked in complete. They're a general understanding of design intent, and there will always be clarifications along the way.
Yeah.
What do you want to do about this detail? It wasn't discussed or decided during design. We needed to figure that now. In the absence of that team discussion, the builder usually makes those decisions themselves based on their previous experience, and sometimes it's not exactly what the owner was expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, that communication about those incremental filling of scope vacancies,
Yeah.
right, is important.
Yeah, something that I've experienced also is even if you do have a wonderful set of plans, the way that the client is reading those plans may not be
Yeah.
actually what the plans represent. And once it gets built, then they're like, oh, I wasn't expecting this to be a wall or whatever. I had a situation early on, my first house that I designed. My wife and I had been working on it for months, and we had our permit set. We were ready to go, and we were talking about some aspect of the kitchen island. And I said, yeah, so I think it's going to look cool when it's next to this post, this column here. And my wife just looked at me and she said, column in the kitchen? What? When did that show up? And I was shocked
That's
because
not square.
it was it was a very
Oh,
structural
wow.
element, and it had literally been there from the very first iterations, but it's just a little black rectangle to somebody who doesn't know what that black rectangle is. So I flipped back through all the versions and I was like, here it is, here it is, here it is. But she didn't understand that. So I think oftentimes we do have changes from clients because they don't necessarily understand what it is they're getting until we build it.
Or even if they do understand what they're reading, sometimes when you get in a space, the proportions maybe aren't what you imagine, or it feels different from the rendering you saw or the elevation you saw.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
My
not
wife
uncommon.
has said that she's my worst client. Yeah. And because she's like you described, she doesn't understand three-dimensional drawings. She's not interested in things like that. And she assumes that if she explains it, that everyone understands what she wants.
Totally.
And whatever gets done is what's in her head. And it's a challenging thing. Everybody thinks differently and has different visualization skills.
Yeah.
Again, that goes back to trusting your team
Yeah.
to understand what your vision is and
Yeah.
try to execute it as best they can.
Yeah.
That's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one maybe thing to point out is like I've seen drawing sets for houses that are anything from the bare bones for permitting to some of the sets we have around here that are hundreds of sheets with details for all different kinds of things. And back to what you said, Tim, there's always something missing. There's no way we could possibly document every single detail of a house with drawings.
Right.
Yeah. I think even the projects that we've done by nationally well-known architects that have very, very detailed plans, we have 10, 20 requests for information before we even get the foundation poured.
Yeah.
Right. And it's no fault. That's how things work.
It
That's
works.
just
Yeah,
how
this is how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you think about, again, from the client's perspective, how many thousands of decisions need to be made throughout the construction process? And that's just stuff they know about, right?
Right.
Like For us, it's all of those things plus
Yeah.
all the technical details of
Kind
how
of
it gets
nice
put
how many
together.
decisions get hidden from
Yeah.
the client because it doesn't matter. It's more like a decision that we're making and how we're constructing something.
Yeah.
I want to pull us back to the contract because I actually, after all of that kind of information at the front side, I just have like a list of notes to run through in the order that they appear in our contract. So the next item covers, and I said this more broadly, the closeout process. So when we get to the end of a job, like what does that look like and how is that addressed in the contract?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that we had to customize the contract to our business model is because the promulgated contracts don't do a very good job of that. Most promulgated contracts are set up so that it sort of permanently terminates the relationship between the client and the builder at a distinct point. And we try to transition, not terminate, try to transition from a construction phase to a post-construction phase, which still maintains that relationship with the client. So in a customer service capacity, when we will continue to service the house and the client as long as they want us to.
So
But
in
the closeout of the contract is more of a determining what it takes to make it habitable and what it takes to make it to the point where they can hang their items on their walls, put the clothing in their closet, move their furniture in place, cover their floors with whatever they want to, without fear of that having to be removed to do more construction work. So that's the phase that we call punch out. That's an industry standard word. I like to consider that just part of a commissioning process where we're fine-tuning the home to perform to its maximum ability. But that's really the closeout phase, and it usually takes a month or two to go through that and make it where everyone in the team is satisfied that the house is crisp and clean and well-appointed, and the clients feel comfortable moving all their possessions in it and beginning to live there. Now, what happens? They move in, and now that they're living there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they begin to see things or want it fine-tuned to their living habits.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And now there's additional work to do, and that's customer service, and we continue to do that. That's all part of the way our contract is structured.
Right.
Yeah.
So you said a typical contract, like at what point would that relationship be terminated typically?
At what would be called final completion.
Okay.
Substantial completion is a legal term that says the house is now habitable. It meets the health and safety standard of being able to be lived in safely and hygienically. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there still aren't a lot of finish items to complete.
Right. So how is that determined?
Is it so?
Go ahead.
Where does this line up with the certificate of occupancy that the city issues? Because that specifically is tied to the permit with the city, but it's also tied to things like if you have a construction loan and certain insurance requirements. So substantial completion and certificate of occupancy, do those line up?
It should. The city is the one that says by issuing a certificate of occupancy, it is certified to be ready to be occupied. That's substantial completion, pretty much by definition.
Right.
In the absence of a municipal authority doing that inspection, that final inspection or issuing a certificate of occupancy, then the client and the builder then determine when the house is habitable. Generally, the client will say, okay, I feel like it's ready, it's safe enough, it's complete enough, I'm going to go ahead and move in. And then by definition in the contract, their move-in determines substantial completion
Yeah.
because they're accepting it as being substantially complete.
Right.
But again, that doesn't mean it's finally complete.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is. It's sometimes it's sort of a nebulous idea of like when is a house finished.
Yeah.
There is no because even though we've discussed that, like when they move in or when you get the C of O, that's right. But in reality, like that's like a Tuesday, and then Wednesday happens, and people are still working or they're moving. Like in reality, it's not really that clean cut. At least not the way that we do it, because like you said, we are still there fine tuning the home.
Yeah, there's a whole nother discussion we can have about what happens as the client begins to take possession and live there. And the discussion about customization of the living, breathing house itself to the client's living habits and cycles versus things that fail or break that need to be repaired as a warranty repair.
Absolutely.
And
Right.
that transitions perfectly to my next question.
Okay.
On the topic of warranty. Just go ahead and flag that for anyone.
Well, to me, warranty happens from the day you start construction, because warranty is a matter of things that you purchase and install in the home or labor that's provided to install components, and they break or fail. And they usually break or fail because of a manufacturer's defect or because faulty installation. So either one of those needs to be addressed as soon as they're discovered, even during construction.
Okay.
We don't wait until the end of construction to go back and fix things,
Right.
right? If there's something broken, it needs to be made right immediately.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons we use the term commissioning is because that's a natural process. It's not something that we shouldn't expect. We should expect things not to be exactly perfect. That's why manufacturers warrant their goods and services. And subcontractors stand behind their work is because they understand that given their best efforts, everyone will get 99.999% of things correct, but there's always that little thing, and with the thousands of components that go into a house, there are bound to be some problems or defects that need to be addressed.
Or even, it might not even be a defect or a problem for some people, but I was just thinking as you were describing that, it's almost like finding a pair of pants that fits pretty good and they could be fine, but then if you get them tailored, they're like, it's a lot better fit. And so like that just depends on the individual. I'm wondering, as far as you were talking about manufacturer or installation defects that happen, let's say something is installed and there's a problem and it's because of the way that item was made. How does that get handled?
Well, that's a tough thing because many, many times in custom home building, the materials, fixtures, faucets, hardware come from a supplier, and then you have a trade contractor who is hired to install them. The trade contractor can't be responsible for the quality or defect in a product that he didn't sell.
Right.
So if it fails, the manufacturer's warranty generally would say, no problem, we'll give you a new one. Let's say caulk has a lifetime guarantee, but let's say some caulk fails that the painter installed. Well, the painter goes to the store and he takes the defective tube of caulk and they say, here's a new tube of caulk. But who's going to pay the painter to take out the old caulk and put in the new caulk? Same thing with a defective faucet cartridge,
Yeah.
right? It came from some manufacturer, Europe or United States, and the plumber installed it to the manufacturer's specifications and the cartridge broke or failed. Well, the manufacturer will give you a new cartridge, but you have to pay the plumber to take out the old and put in the new one.
Yeah.
That's part of the warranty process. It's just the way it works.
Yeah.
And this is maybe an obvious question or answer to us, but who pays for that extra labor?
You mean during construction or after construction?
Both.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think if it's a cost that a trade contractor charges for legitimate work that he had to do that was not his fault, it's a cost of the work.
Okay.
And it clearly says in the contract that any cost of the work is a cost borne by the client.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then after?
Well, the same, except the
Same.
manufacturer is supplying the free product,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And then what if it's because of a bad installation?
then the trade contractor has to take responsibility for it. And if he damaged the product that he installed due to faulty installation, he not only has to take responsibility for the labor to install it and correct it, but to buy the new part or piece that has to go in.
Yeah.
And again, that speaks to having a builder contractor that you trust to be the arbiter and controller of whose responsibility it is to take care of certain things.
Yeah.
It's also going back to your point earlier, really important to take care of those things as soon as they're discovered.
Yeah.
Because if time passes, then it becomes more difficult to maybe remember or identify exactly how the thing happened, the problem
That's a good
occurred, and people can point fingers and it gets more complicated.
Right. One of the nuances of this also, and I think it's important to understand, is that I've made the comment that houses are living, breathing things, and that's very true. They're made of organic materials in many cases, and those materials, when you buy them, they're in a natural environment. We modify them, bring them to a site, and put them in a different environment, and that environment has different climate conditions, it has different structural conditions, and we can expect any organic product to change over time. And let's take lumber, for example. We build a house out of lumber structurally, and it generally comes to us with a moisture content 20 to 30%. And we install it and enclose it. And over time, as the environment changes to a drier climate due to air conditioning or heating, then that lumber will shrink 1 or 2%. And what does that do to everything that's attached to that lumber? It makes it crack or settle, right? And it doesn't, I would say I've never seen a house that we've built that within the first 12 to 24 months, evidence of that shrinkage didn't occur.
Yeah.
In door adjustments, drywall cracking, trim expansion or contraction.
Yeah.
And that's a service that we provide, but we expect it to happen.
Yeah.
And it's a cost of the work.
I'm glad you described that, because I think it's a sort of term that everyone uses, the house is settling, but I don't think people really understand what that means. And to me, the term settling, I often think of the foundation moving or something like that. But when you describe it that way, it's much more easy to visualize why you're getting these cracks, because your house is getting 1% smaller.
Right. Now, I will say that maybe one of the distinctions or nuances is the difference between cost-plus contracts and fixed-price contracts is that it's a shifting of the risk between builder and buyer. And we could consider that a builder who likes to do fixed-price contracts and a client who wants to do a fixed-price contract is going to shift some of that risk from the buyer to the contractor, builder. And by that, I mean the builder may say, I know there are going to be unknowns that are going to happen, like lumber shrinkage. And I know that I'm going to have to take responsibility for that because this is a turnkey contract. So I'm going to add an extra 10% onto my price and absorb that risk. But I can promise you, in 99% of the cases, that amount that needs to be added to cover all those unknown risks far outweighs what the actual cost turns out to be. So,
or he's going out of business pretty quick.
That's right. So we like the cost plus contract because I think it's a fair way for buyers to only pay what the cost is. They're not paying for some fudge factor or extra insurance that the builder has to add into the formula to make sure they stay solvent.
Yeah, if you like knowing exactly what the costs of the job are, cost plus is really great. It's super transparent. Yeah. So the next topic I have is insurance. Just like, how does that work? One of the questions that came up when my husband was looking at this contract was, wait, so there's like all these different kinds of insurance. And he was like, is builder's risk standard? Like, would you always have builder's risk? So, like, what are the insurance types that are involved? And I don't know, what maybe should someone know before going into a project?
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Let me just lay out the different kinds of insurance, and then we can toss
Okay.
around the differences and what they each accomplish.
Yeah.
Each general contractor and all of their subcontractors that work on the project should have general liability insurance. Most often the standard is $1 million general liability policy, and then with multiple occurrences within the same period, it's a $2 million aggregate, so to speak. And then really general liability is to cover the builder's liability for job site injuries, the things that the builder might be held responsible for, people suffering a loss on the job. Many times people think that general liability covers defects in the work, but it doesn't. General liability does not cover defect in any work product that the holder of the policy has. So that needs to be clearly understood. So second, builder's risk, like you mentioned. Builder's risk is like a homeowner's insurance policy for homes that are under construction. It's real simple, right? You have a fire, you have a theft. With a deductible, those things are covered under builder's risk.
Yeah, it covers the materials that
Right.
are on site. Yeah.
Workers' compensation insurance for the workers that work on the job. In Texas, we have a little bit of flexibility there. There's workers' compensation policies, which are very expensive for construction workers. However, subcontractors have the right to waive the requirement of workers' compensation if they sign a document that says, hey, we're an independent contractor. We don't work for you, general contractor. We are our own business. We're taking responsibility for ourselves and our own employees. You're not responsible for our employees. They sign that waiver, then generally the general contractor and the homeowner don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
I question whether that really holds up well in the long run, but it is there, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And the last thing is automobile liability insurance. Trucks coming to, parking at, working at the site need to be covered under liability insurance there too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Yeah. And as far as whether or not those things are required, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if by law they are. I think probably, but I know that by good business practice they should be, right?
So
If
is
you're
there-
having people come on your site that are not insured, then that increases your risk.
Okay. So specifically, if you were doing a remodel and your builder said, I don't have builder's risk insurance, is that okay? Do you just maintain your homeowner's policy?
Maybe
Okay.
that's yeah. There aren't very many homeowners insurance policies that if the client moves out of their home
Okay.
to do the remodel will cover all of the exposure that
see.
can happen. If they're living there while the work is going on, they can add a rider onto their homeowner's policy that says, we're going to do some remodeling work. Here's the value of it. Cover us for that,
Oh.
for this exposure.
Yeah.
And the insurance company will do that. But generally, it's only there because, quite honestly, most builders' risk losses happen when no one's there. In the evening or at
Sure.
night, when somebody left something that was a fire risk or something,
Yeah,
or
that's
right.
vandalism,
That
or
makes sense.
theft. Those things happen when no one's there. And so the idea of the homeowner living there during the work takes a lot of that exposure away from the insurance company.
Right. Okay.
And if it is financed with a bank loan, the bank requires you to have the builder's risk insurance.
Right.
okay.
And they even have, set amounts that it needs to be set for depending on the project.
Okay. And then the last item I have is the RCLA or RCLA.
So we have to go down this path.
Yeah. It's right. I don't know. It's in there.
Okay. Well, I mean, and I'll just give you the
We'll save that one for Travis.
let me give you the
Okay.
very
Just high level.
high
super
level. That's all I'm going to give you, just the high level. So 25 years ago or so, the state legislature decided to put in place a residential construction commission to help represent consumers' interest in the home building remodeling process. Part of that also was the builder community saying, if we're going to buy into this and participate in this process, we want some protections too, as far as the limitation of our liability in dealing with clients in modifying or building their homes. And so this residential construction process created what was called the Residential Construction Liability Act, RCLA, and it determined specifically what the homeowner client's responsibilities were in a construction contract relationship and what the builder's responsibilities were and what the extent of their liability is if they live up to those obligations. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a quick way to
The
describe it.
commission went away. It was sundown 3 or 4 years later, but the RCLA law still lives there and is generally inserted in the contract in one form or another just to protect, quite honestly, the builder's limitation of liability.
Mm-hmm.
And is that something that's nationwide or is that a state law?
State law.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's directly related to my next question, which is, I'm sorry, I kind of zoned out for a second because I was trying to figure out how to work that in to my next question, which is thinking about, the tab agreements that I think a lot of builders are using. If thinking about my friend, that's what was sent to us that he's looking at. Is there anything just like that we haven't covered that you would recommend if someone's looking at that to kind of check or ask about with their builder?
There are several versions of the Texas Association of Builders promulgated contract, and they're usually specific to the type of relationship that you have with the contractor or the contractor has with the owner. For example, there's one for remodeling. Mm-hmm. There's one for custom building. There's one for custom building on the builder's lot, and there's one for custom building on the owner's lot.
Yeah.
So several iterations there because all those relationships need to be a little bit different. Mm-hmm. Because it is an industry standardized and promulgated, paid for contract by the home building industry, it looks out after the builder's interest. And if you read it, you'd think that it's not grossly unfair. It actually holds the builder accountable to make sure that the client's interests are looked out after as well. But this is a great point about, one, if a builder is using the tab contract, they're supposed to be required to be members of the Texas Association of Builders, which speaks to their interest in living up to some professional standard, mm-hmm. right? And being held accountable to an industry standard. So that's a good plus. Mm-hmm. But
in lieu of licensing, I can't say that word. Licensure?
Right.
In Texas, because you don't have to be licensed to be a builder.
Good. It's like they've checked a box.
Right. That being said, I think it's something we talked about a while ago, that make sure that you have a relationship or develop a relationship with your home builder that you've chosen to work with so that you trust them to the extent that regardless of what the contract says, you know that they're going to be reasonable and listen to the points that your attorney or your representatives have to say relative to looking out after you, the client's interests. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, the contract, very few of them don't get some minor degree of modification.
Right.
Because some attorneys and some clients might say, oh, I don't feel comfortable agreeing to that. How can we come up with compromise language? Mm-hmm. And hopefully they're not extensive. If they're too extensive, get away from the tab contract and come to something that's not. Because if you take a promulgated contract and you modify it too much, it almost voids the validity of the contract.
Yeah, just right around.
I think what you just said is actually a great point. It's good information for somebody. You had mentioned, one for
Finally.
You had mentioned earlier about the recommendation of involving a trusted legal professional. And I think sort of pointing out the fact that somebody who is handed a contract shouldn't just automatically accept or refuse that contract. Like they should read it and make modifications that they see fit according to
Right.
what their legal advice is.
Right.
So it's not an all or nothing. Like there is some negotiation that can happen with that.
Right. I think one of the things we discovered in our business is when we give someone a contract and we suggest that they review it with their attorney, their legal professional, don't automatically disagree with a section or a component of the contract without understanding its intent. Legalese is hard for even people who use it all the time to understand, like us. And it's only able to be truly interpreted by the legal professionals who drafted it. Oftentimes, even legal professionals who are not familiar with contractual law, that may be like a family estate attorney that they've hired, won't understand what the intent of the contract is, and they'll just reject anything that looks like it's in the builder's favor.
Yeah.
Sit down and have the conversation. Highlight sections you don't understand, highlight sections that you question. This doesn't sound right to me. And then go back and have that conversation with the builder to understand what he's trying to accomplish. And 9 times out of 10, there is language that accomplishes what both parties want to achieve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a great barometer for, one, the communication that you have with your builder from the start. And 2, if the builder is unwilling to listen to those or is offended by the fact that you've come back with some changes to their contract, maybe that's not the builder for you.
That's kind of a red flag.
Yeah, it really
Right?
is. I mean, I've seen a lot of times, I see contracts that go back and forth, and I think every time I've seen you send one out, you usually say, highlight anything you have questions on and we can discuss.
Yeah.
And I think that we're pretty accommodating. If someone has a little thing that they want us to add or change,
Yeah.
it's it's an indication of what our future relationship is going to look like.
Yeah.
And
We have a great relationship with our contract attorney, and I think we understand what his intentions are. He understands what ours. And oftentimes, he doesn't have any problems when we make minor modifications.
no.
Yeah.
He'll just say, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, I think, a good spot maybe to wrap things up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great discussion,
Yeah,
guys.
yeah, it really was.
Yeah.
Surprisingly. No, I knew it was going to be great.
All right.
That's it for another episode of Work in Process. Thanks for listening. If you've got a question, a topic suggestion, or want to start a project with us, send an email to hello@risingerbuild.com.
You can also find us on Instagram at risingerbuild_ATX or on YouTube by searching Risinger Build. We'd love to hear from you.